Zimbabwe's unemployment rate is full of actively job-seeking people. Today we have in the studio a woman who has championed the cause when it comes to issues of employment. She believes that working with your hands is a good way of working. Welcome to the show, Mandy.
Thank you very much.
So tell us about yourself.
As you have said, my name is Mandy Leratolusala. I'm a mother of two. I've got two toddlers, a boy who's 6 and is in grade 1, and a beautiful daughter. She is ECDA, and I'm married.
So tell me about the kind of business that you're into.
The kind of business that I am into is one which I'm passionate about. It is also one that I've gone to school to study.
Right.
I did human resources management. So I'm running an employment agency specifically for domestic workers. I don't do anything besides domestic workers. So we place, we recruit, we place, and then we also train these ladies to work in people's homes.
What is a domestic worker in your own definition?
A domestic worker is somebody that you bring into your own home,
right,
to do some work for you, and then you pay her for that job. So this includes nannies, baby minders,
right,
private chefs, chauffeurs, even the housekeepers.
And gardeners.
And gardeners, of course.
Right.
And you know, in Zimbabwe, we just call them maids. It's just an overall term. But you know, baby minders, housekeepers, private chefs, drivers.
Right.
As long as they are working in your household and you are paying them, they are a domestic worker.
What inspired you to start this agency?
It was out of my own experience. You know, when I got married, in our culture, okay, and then it is the responsibility of your relatives or your in-laws to take care of your needs, especially after you've given birth.
Okay.
And these needs actually include getting a domestic worker for you. It was actually my first child. I was staying with my father-in-law. So it was the responsibility of my in-laws to get me a domestic worker.
Right.
So they organized with my mother. They didn't ask me what I wanted, what kind of a person I need, because they believed they knew what I needed because they were mothers themselves. So they sent me a domestic worker, and to my shock, it was just a young girl. She was a girl herself, and I was supposed to be leaving my baby with a girl. But at that particular time, I couldn't say anything or do anything because it was being done for me. So instead, I had to be grateful.
Right.
And I can safely say it was not a good experience because I think I ended up changing about 4 domestic workers, and there I was staying with my in-law. Imagine what they would think of me. They would think maybe Mrora Anones. But
and you don't appreciate.
Yeah, but in actual truth is the people that were being given to me were not particularly suitable.
Right.
Because in that instant, everybody was sending me children. So that's when I realized I could do something. There's a gap. There's a gap in the industry. And remember, I said I did human resources management. So I discovered with my educational qualifications, my professional experience, and my personal experience, I discovered I was not the only woman who was struggling to get a domestic worker when and as they needed her. So that's when I started this. So I started with my family, my friends here and there, and I realized I could actually turn this into a business.
But talking about your indoors and how you started and how it affected you, I believe, emotionally, do you think our tradition and our culture has an effect when it comes to employment?
It does, but the first thing is they are doing it out of love.
Right.
And it's an experience, it's a practice that goes on and on and on. So in our culture, we get domestic workers who are really disadvantaged women from rural areas.
Right.
And when you are a first-time mother, most people believe you should get a young girl because she's easier to manage and stuff like that. And anokwanisa kushanda nemwana, kutamba nemwana because achiri mwana. But it really differs with the household. At times you've got a 5-bedroomed house, and how are you expecting a young girl arikuva kunkai kumusha kwangu kuti awe azosara nemwana who does not iye pachezwa yake asati atombo kura, and most of these kids anenge vasina kupedza chikoro. So it was done out of love, vachifunga kuti vari kubatsira that young girl, and also helping me. And it's a practice that has been going on. But I'm saying this practice is not really okay. It disadvantages the young girl. It also disadvantages Inini as a mother.
Right.
So we just need to professionalize it, normalize it. Yes, people can get employment, but what kind of people are we looking for?
And maybe just to add on to that, I think we also have to educate the general populace on our culture and how we feel it's out of love, as you're saying, yet it's actually abuse, because you're talking of how young this help was. But then she was young, she still has a right to education, a right to be a child and live her own life.
Yes.
So what then did you do to set up your organization and your agency?
So I was currently employed when this was happening.
Right.
So I started researching. It was just an idea. So I didn't have anybody to really assist me because I didn't know anybody that was running an employment agent, especially
Right.
for domestic workers. So I started researching in Zimbabwe, how do you go about it? And I discovered I could register with the Ministry of Labor. I went to the Ministry of Labor, did that. They'll give you some specifications, requirements. If you meet all those requirements, then they give you the license.
So what are the requirements for you to register an employment agent?
So they have got the physical requirements, like you need an office, which
Right.
has a waiting room, which has got an office, which has got a training room. And also the person that will be managing the agents actually has to have a background in personnel management, and I had human resources management.
Which was an advantage
Exactly.
to you.
So I was basically managing it. I had to submit my CV, my certificates and everything. I'm glad to say that they were very helpful. The people that I met there, they would actually assist me, tell me how best could I do this and this and this. And then I also relied on research. I traveled, I researched in South Africa, I traveled South Africa. And, it's a continuous learning process.
Right.
I've also traveled to America, and I could see how in America they were running their employment agents.
Right.
And I am glad to say that I'm not off the mark. You know how interesting it is when
So
you
in America and South Africa, you were looking into various agencies,
Yes.
or specifically in ones that do domestic workers?
specifically for domestic workers.
Okay.
And the reason why I really did research in South Africa is because South Africa is far ahead when it comes to domestic worker agencies.
Right.
They've been doing this for over
long time.
20 years and stuff like that. And South Africa is not really different from Zimbabwe, the dynamics, the people, the culture and everything. So I could really relate to the way things were done in South Africa. Unlike when you go outside Zimbabwe,
Right.
it's outside Africa, it's actually a different playfield altogether. So I learned a lot from both my trips in South Africa and even my
America.
trips in America. And I still continue researching, continue learning. Learning is a continuous process.
Right.
Yeah.
You're watching Women Running Businesses. To those that are joining us, join us after the break as we hear more about the Domestic Workers Agency that is being run by Mandy. Welcome to the second segment right here on Women Running Businesses. I'm Gertrude, and today we have Mandy, who runs a domestic workers agency. So Mandy, you were still telling me how education has also empowered you in your agency. So tell me about the criteria that you use to choose these different domestic workers.
There's this notion by the majority of people that domestic work is not work.
Right.
This is why the industry is so informal, and this is why I'm also in the industry, because I believe it's work. You're paying somebody to do that. So most people underestimate domestic work because they believe any woman can wash dishes, they can
Right.
take care of the kids, they can cook, but it's different. You are getting somebody to come into your household to do a perfect job.
Right.
Personally, I don't like laundry. I prefer my laundry to be done by somebody just because I'm not that good in laundry. So I actually have to pay somebody to do laundry. So domestic work is not as general as everybody thinks.
Right.
It comes with the personality, it comes with the experience, it comes even with the willingness, So you see most people in Zimbabwe, they believe if you fail to proceed with education, if you're a widow, if you're very poor, then the kind of work that you need to do is domestic work.
Right.
But no. So this is what happens when somebody comes to my office and they say they're looking for a job as a domestic worker. For me, I really consider experience.
Right.
As I say, people underestimate domestic work. If you have never worked in somebody's house and you come to an agent, it's really difficult for you to be humble, to understand that you are not longer in your own home or you're no longer with your parents, you're working under somebody. So at least if you've got at least a year or so of experience, then we can start talking.
So if I don't have experience, how do you assist me?
Unfortunately for now, I do not place people without experience.
Right.
But it does not mean that we neglect you. You can still be part of our community, we interact, and you learn from the other people that are actually in domestic work.
Right.
And you can actually get employment through referrals. You know, an agent is just one way of getting employment.
Right.
But for me, somebody's paying me, trusting me to actually give them somebody who knows what they're doing.
Right.
So if you're not experienced, then you can rely on your relatives, your friends to assist you to get that job. Then after you've got an experience, then you can come.
So besides experience, what else do you need from a person that is looking for a job?
So we actually have a database. So when you come, you need to bring your copy of ID. We need to know that you are a person whose existence, who's living, who's recognized by our country. So we need your ID. We need your proof of residence. We also need, if you're married, your husband's copy of ID. And mostly it's for security reasons, because I'm placing you into somebody's house. And also a police clearance after the employer's request.
Right.
The reason is most dubious agencies, because they say at times police clearance is expensive, so they end up doing fake police clearances.
Right.
So if you get it, you come and you want somebody, I encourage you to go and organize a police clearance for her on your own, instead of me getting that police clearance.
Right.
That way you're certain that this police clearance is authentic and it's correct, and you are satisfied that we have done something without having bias. Because I can get my cousin and I want you to get a job, I can cook up some peppers and stuff like that. And the other thing that we consider to be very important is a reference. We need somebody to vouch for you, to say that
you have worked in
that
my house
you have
before.
worked.
Right.
Yes. And if you really, and also we need, if you can't get that reference, because I don't know, most of us, especially the black people, we don't give references. I've noticed, I'm not being racial, but I've noticed we do not give references. Maybe because by the time that we end this relationship or terminate the contract, the relationship will be sour.
Right.
Yes. But references are very important. So I also encourage the domestic workers to live properly, so that you get a what? A reference letter. And then when you get a reference, that is what we also use. We can even get letters from your church pastors, local community headmen, and but somebody has to vouch for you. I also need your next kin of details.
All right.
If you get ill, there's an accident that happens at your workplace,
You need someone to contact.
the employer will come back to me, and I will need to have that information. So I also need that information. And before we send you out for work, we actually do what we call induction training. We actually have to prepare you mentally, physically, and what you're to expect when you go for an interview, for your first week, even for your stay. This is why I require to meet the domestic workers in person, because you have to talk. I have to know about your background. I have to know like your future plans and stuff like that. And then I can find a suitable boss for you. So I do this on my own.
So since domestic workers and your agency work in a two-way relationship, do you also have requirements for the employer, since you already have for the domestic workers?
Yes. But for the employers, the major thing that I'm really concerned about is your ability to pay.
Right.
Because you're supposed to be paying this person for your job.
Right.
So when you come to me, I actually ask you how much you're going to be paying. So if you're going to be paying $80 to the domestic worker, I'm not going to give you a mate.
So what is the stipulated amount or minimum wage for a domestic worker?
It's 95, which is stipulated by the government. But people can afford more than. I place maids who get paid 400, 500. Others are paid in US dollar. The minimum is just the best.
How do you place or advise an employer or your domestic worker when it comes to the size of the houses? Because vanhu vakasiyana, umwe anenge achishanda kana mu one room achikuita maybe just the laundry and the ironing. Maybe the next person is supposed to clean the windows in a double-story house. What then happens when it comes to placement of salaries? Okay,
so as I've said, that I discuss with the employee before engaging them in our agents. I also discuss with the employer. How many kids do you have? How big is your house? What salary are you looking at? And for those very big houses, some people will tell you I actually have 4 domestic workers, so I need somebody to complement my stuff. So we actually discuss these things.
Right.
Yes. But when it comes to salary, I only tell you the minimum. But I encourage you to pay as much as you can. Because you know what? You are entrusting this person with your most valuable possessions, which are your keys, which are your houses, and stuff like that. So people actually can pay as much as they can. 95 is the minimum. But you would notice that there are people who are paying as little as 60. But if you're paying 60, I won't place through my agents.
You're watching Women Running Businesses, and we're learning a lot about domestic workers, their rights, and how much they're supposed to get paid with Mandy. So Mandy, tell me, are you registered with any ministry in these dealings that you're doing?
Yes. For you to operate an employment agent, you're actually supposed to be registered under the Ministry of Labor.
Right.
So this is another thing that people that are using agencies actually need to find out. Because, we have got a lot of stories that are going around with employment agencies, even human trafficking and stuff like that. If you want a domestic worker from an agent, just ask them, are you registered with the ministry? Or you can even check with the Ministry of Labor. So yes, our agency is actually registered with the Ministry of Labor. It has been registered for the past 5 years.
That's really good.
Thank you.
I just want to find out as well, Mandy, Kuti, a lot of people are looking for jobs. We know that the employment rate right here in Zimbabwe is growing steadily. How do you contact people, or how do people then contact you when they need jobs?
I rely mostly, to be honest, I've been doing this for a while, informally and formally.
Right.
So one is the word of mouth. There's nothing as powerful as word of mouth or referral. The person that has benefited from my service actually tells the other person to use my services. We actually also use social media. We know how powerful social media is these days. We also have an interactive website, so we have got an online presence if you want, and that website actually works for both the employers and the employees. And basically it's just the word, networks, social media, online presence.
Online marketing, advertising will get your business to a certain level. Join me in the last and final segment right here on Women Running Businesses with Mandy as we hear more about domestic work. Welcome to the third and final segment right here on Women Running Businesses. I'm Gertrude, and in the house we have Mandy, who's telling us a lot of insightful information about hiring a domestic worker. And this is the most exciting episode because I get to make you do whatever I want. So before we go there, can you tell me about nyaya dzinoitika mudzimba? We've got some domestic workers that are very traditional, that are very cultural. Some are very religious. Someone can have their time yekuti arikuda kupfungaidza mumba. We've got different beliefs yekuti mzukuru kana chida kuchengetedza basa rako pfungaidza ndove kana yeshiri kana kuti yei mumba, and this is my house and my son or my daughter's got asthma. I find you doing this. Umwe munhu anenge akaisa matombo ake in my house, umwe akungoita zvinhu zvakasiyana siyana. Recently we've got an issue the maid who was using her urine to cook for their bosses. What's your take on that, and how do you protect the employee from people like that?
There is a lot of stories that go around domestic workers and work. Some of them are true, some of them are not true. But there's one thing that I always tell both parties. You hear most ladies saying that when you come to my house, you are part of the family. I'm treating you as my mzukuru, or mbuya wangu, or mwana wangu. And the maid does that. Ukadaro mnaka relax. Anongoti ndrepamba pangu, pamba pedu, so I'll continue to do what I used to do.
So is someone supposed to be strict? How am I supposed to then handle them?
Remember, we said this is a job. We are paying somebody to do that.
Right.
So the first thing is both parties have to treat it as their formal employment.
Right.
You are bringing somebody into your house. Just think of the way you are treated when you actually go to your workplace.
Right.
I used to work at a hotel, manage hotel employees. there were certain do's and don'ts because we were working in a hotel. This hairstyle, I could have been fired back in the hotel because they were paying me to do what I was supposed to do at their hotel.
Right.
So something with domestic work. So when you employ somebody, do not tell them that uripamba, relax and stuff like that. Because anongozobanema practices ake ajaira ongoyo maita mumba mako.
Right.
First thing when you employ them, tell them that I am paying you to do your work.
Right.
Fine, we'll have a mutual relationship where we need to understand each other, but I don't expect this and this and this.
Right.
I expect this and this and this. It's also on our end before we place them for employment. This is the induction training that I was telling them.
Right.
You are a white garment person and you are going for an SDA. When you get into their home,
you do what they do.
And you do what they do.
Right.
So this is how we handle them. Always have rules for your home, what you expect out of your domestic worker. And as a domestic worker, you should also have boundaries.
Right.
It's very important. Because no matter relaxa, anu banya so relaxa. Yeah.
Then what happens when one does not have a proper understanding na employer? Do I have the power to then come back to you to cancel my contract?
Yes, we can facilitate the cancelling of the contract.
Right.
So when you come to us as an employer, we'll tell you how we'll assist. Because at times we have disagreements which can be solved by a third part.
Right.
So both parties are actually free to come to us. Can you talk to my maid? We actually do that a lot. At the same time, the maid can actually come back to us. Can you please talk to my employer?
Right.
Although we have got our limitations because we do not really want to interfere, but yes, we do come in and assist. As long as you have called us, you need our help, we come in and help.
So what challenges have you faced? Because you say you've been running this agency for the past 5 years. What challenges have you faced, both from females and males you've been working with?
I have been running it both full-time and part-time.
Right.
So all along, I was doing it part-time. One of my greatest challenges, I remember when I started my agents, I was actually working because I was still toying with the idea whether I should do this or not do this. And my then employer discovered that I was registering an agent. I hadn't even started operating, can you believe it? But I got fired from my job because of that.
Wow.
And you know, it was such a stressful moment for me. I hadn't even gotten any single cent out of that, but just the idea that I was trying to do something for me and somebody had that I was, you know, and I went on to tell them that this is what I'm doing.
Right.
But 2-3 months later, they say, we don't want you because you're doing this. But God is great. That same person that fired me is also one of my greatest customers.
So
now.
how did you then rise up from that?
It was a very difficult moment, I think. And you know, when you are idle, I always make people laugh. Your husband is there, what do you do? I'm not going to work. I ended up getting pregnant and I was not working. This is how my daughter was born, because I was not working. I was idle, I was stressed, I ended up
having a baby.
You know, but I had to rise up because I had children to take care of. I had a husband who actually needed my assistance. So I decided, if I was fired for this, let me just do it full time.
Pursue it.
Yeah, let me do it full time. So I decided to do it full time. And yes, here I am doing it full time. I'm happier. My position was a management position back then. And if I can survive with my salary, and if I can survive now, take care of my kids, send them to the schools that I really wanted to send them back then when I was still a manager, and I can do it happily, it means I'm doing something right.
So you could say this agency is quite lucrative for you?
Yes, it is.
Okay. What advice would you give to the public who also want to run an employment agency?
Firstly, I did not do it because I really wanted money. Remember, I was still working. I had a very good job. I was earning a lot of money back then when I started, but I also did it out of passion.
Right.
Of course, passion is overrated at times, but if you really feel there's something that you want to do it. I was fired for this, and I continued with my dream because this is what I really wanted to do. So if there's something that you want to do and you believe in it, just go for it. And you know, when you're running an employment agency, you're not dealing with goods, It's not like you're bringing a dress, buying it, and then reselling it. You're actually working with human beings, two human beings, the employer and the employee. Right. And I tell you, there's nothing as difficult as working with people.
But then you have succeeded. So we are in our third and final segment, and I'm going to ask you to just sing me one of your favorite songs before we wrap up. That's going to close our episode.
You know what, Kitty? I was actually fired from choir when I was in primary, me and my best friend, and I'll never do that. Choir. Primary, who gets fired from the choir out of primary? And I don't want to embarrass myself in front of the national TV.
So she doesn't want to embarrass herself in front of national TV. That was Mandy telling us about domestic workers and how she has succeeded to empower the different women and men around to get employment. Join us again next week, right here on Women Running Businesses. I'm your host, Gertrude Munamu.